We're here with composer Anthony Wilson, and we're going to be talking about one particular work called One Idea. So it already gives the title away for violin and piano. But before we talk about that, welcome Anthony, should I say.
Thank you.
Before we talk about that, I jumped on the website and I looked at your composer mantra. As a composer, I always strive to write music that will provoke an emotional response in the listener. So, that being the case, what do you think what was your emotional response to this particular work, and what do you think the listener was thinking of? Because it is two different kettle of fishes, really, isn't it?
With Unide, you mean?
Mm.
Yes. Well, with Unide, I didn't have a definite emotional response in mind while I was writing it. Other than to say that I found it quite intense, the process of writing that piece emotionally for me. But
why would that be?
Well, I'm not sure why it was. It's just the way I experienced it. I wasn't going into it trying to deliberately make it that way. It just finished up being that way, and I certainly didn't have an emotional response that I was seeking. But as I experimented more with the piece, I enjoyed the emotional intensity, and so it was important for me to continue down that path.
And have you, when it was performed, did you get people coming up to you to talk about their emotional response?
I've got quite a bit of positive feedback about it, but no, people didn't tend to say, other than that they found that it was emotionally intense. Well, some of them said that, not everybody said that, but some said that it was intense emotionally, but they didn't go into detail as to what emotions it brought up for them, no.
In regards to writing for violin and piano, have you done much of that?
I had done some of that beforehand. Previously, for many years, I'd written almost exclusively for the piano.
But that's your instrument?
That's my instrument, and as a teenager, I used to do a lot of improvising at the piano and gradually sort of became interested in tailoring those improvisations into structured pieces of music. And then I suppose about 15 years ago I became more interested in branching out into other instrumentations, branching out in general with my composition, but particularly with instrumentation. And so I started to try pieces. And the one instrument I was drawn to, other than the piano, was the violin. I've always found it very expressive, and even though I never played it myself, I've always been very drawn to it. My first couple of attempts, with a lot of things I wasn't all that happy with, but something seemed to change when I came to write Unide. It seemed to happen a bit more naturally for me.
If we get on to the piece itself, just wondering whether or not the intensity was based on the fact of your self-imposed way you wanted to structure the work. Because I would say to anyone who is interested in the work to jump on the website and have a look at the Melbourne Composers League recorded performance in the archives, because there's a lovely program note there that you probably wrote, and it really does express everything that requires you to know about the piece. So do jump online. But I think at the end of the day, was it because you were, as you said, you were trying to delay the tonic chord at this oscillation between the relative major, relative minor, F major, D minor? Mm-hmm. Is that how? I mean, it wasn't meant to be done as an exercise, I wouldn't think, but is that the intensity, the mere fact of you pushing yourself not to get to the resolution?
Yes, well, that was the idea, the Unide that I had in my mind initially, because previously I thought my tonality was a bit too predictable in a lot of my pieces, and I was determined to move away from that. And I just, it created for me a totally different kind of sound, and I just became very enthralled with that, a new discovery, and wanted to pursue it as much as possible. So I was determined to I mean, initially my idea was just to see how long I could go before giving the game away tonally, but I liked the result so much that I decided that I wanted the whole piece to have that kind of quality about it.
So that's the one idea. So it's the one idea is not necessarily a theme that is developed. The one idea was the idea of not resolving.
Yes, that's right, and that was a new way of writing for me. But it did start off being that one idea, but it then branched into other things. So the structure of the piece was very much affected by this new way of thinking as well. In the past, the structure of my works was very predictable, and whereas in this, I wanted to break away from that. I've been sort of experimenting with that for some time previous, but this was the piece that I really wanted to push through in that regard.
So could we say that this is a watershed piece for you?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Yeah, which is it's a good thing actually. That This is the one that you can say, well, this is previous, and now is it still continuing that way, or have you moved on again?
I feel I've moved on again, but that the results of that process that I went through are still with me very much today. Yes.
When you said the structure of the work, what structure are we talking about here?
Well, I see it as that the piece has a prologue and an epilogue, which is based upon the same material, and then there's the main body of the work in the middle. And the main body of the work, I would say, is in 3 parts, but that doesn't mean that it's a ternary structure. It's certainly not an ABA structure. The 3 parts are different from each other, although there is material that's shared between them.
Well, that gives it the cohesion that is obviously in the work, which I quite enjoy there. So this oscillation, that brings out the tension rather than the cohesion. So you've got the structural at the meta level or the macro level, and then you've got the nuanced level of where are we going with that. But the cohesion is still actually, I hear it in my way, it's still actually there, because we're not deviating with the relative minor, relative major, you know what I mean? We're not going into grands,
No.
you know what I mean? So we're really just flipping between the minor and the major.
Yes.
So was that an interest for you to see how you could actually demonstrate going forward with a particular 2 key structures that were very similar?
It wasn't a conscious thing that was going through my mind at that time. It was the most important thing to me was to avoid giving the game away too obviously, as to that we're definitely in this key. That was the thing that I was experimenting with, and that was most firmly in my mind. So I kind of enjoyed it being suggestive rather than outright, expressing the key. Yes, that's the way I put it, that I was wanting to do things by suggestion much more.
Well, I think we've suggested that we go on to the performance of this. So thank you very much, Anthony, for all your time today in giving us a little bit more information about this work. The recording we're going to hear is from a concert by the Melbourne Composers League from Trinity Uniting Church in Brighton. It's September the 24th, way back in 2011. And Tim Veldman is the violinist and Michael Kieran Harvey is the pianist. So do enjoy it.